What up, YouTube? It's your favorite barber, Jason, and thanks for tuning in. And today we're gonna turn this into this. Stay tuned. The very first thing we have to do, of course, is comb this hair down. We want to lay it as naturally as possible so we can have the cleanest canvas to start this haircut off with. My client asked for a bald fade with a #1 with the grain. So the first thing I'm gonna do is snap on my one guard and go over the top portion of his scalp up to the ridge with the grain, making sure that I pay attention to the grain of the hair or the growth direction of the hair. And I'm gonna do this with my comb as well. I choose a comb over a brush because the comb separates the hair versus a brush that gathers the hair together. And this is going to be the glory piece of the haircut besides the blend, because if you mess this part up, you're going to have spots and uneven hair placement, and it's going to throw the whole haircut off. So make sure that you go over as much as possible to make the hair even as possible up top. And there's the comb again, combing down the hair before I make this bald line. Alright, so my client wants it high but not too high. So I'm going to start the line where the box and the C of the lineup meet. Then I'm going to check in the back to where I want the line, right? Once I get it right, then I'm going to come around the side and stop. And then I'm going to meet the front line with the back line. And this way I get a perfect bald line every single time. There's no guesswork in it, you know what I'm saying? So once I get that, I'm gonna check it, make sure everything is cool, and then I'm gonna continue to bald it out. And I'm gonna go over this bald and make sure all the hair is gone, because you don't wanna go through one step then later have to come back and clean it up or whatever. So I'm gonna make sure this whole bottom of this bald line is actually as bald as I can get it without using a balder, because my client gets irritated with balders. Look at the kid. I was talking to my Instagram live feed. I was going live while I was filming this haircut. But anyways, I was being extra. So make sure you ask your client before you use any tool, because you don't want them to come back with an issue that you're gonna have to later regret. So make sure you consult with them and ask them everything that you're gonna need to do, and make sure that they're okay with it before you proceed to use that tool. So my next step is to grab my 1/16 or 0.5 or 0 guard if using Andis, and close the blade and make my initial first guideline. Now I'm going to use the 1/16 guard instead of an open blade, because it's easier to blend an open blade into the 1/16 guard versus the 1/16 guard into the open blade. Now when I'm making this guideline, I'm paying attention to the top of the guideline, not really much doing anything to the bottom, because it's going to be blended with the blade anyway. So I'm going to make sure that the top of the guideline is even as possible, and not too much worrying about the bottom of the guideline, because it would make no sense to, you know, cut that real good then have to cut it again. This is the step where I use my brush, and the hair is so short where it really doesn't matter, and the brush is really used to just get the debris out the way. Now I'm going to take this blade all the way closed, and I'm going to start to blend out that bald line. I'm going to go about 3/4 to halfway up between these two guidelines and start blending out. You're going to flick a little bit. Now this blade is not 0 gap, but it's pretty close. And when I mentioned before that it's easier to blend the open blade into the 1/16, this is why. So once I blend out that bottom with it all the way closed, I'm gonna ever so slightly open that blade and flick the rest of the way up. So you close the blade all the way, notch out that very bottom bald line, and then you ever so slightly open up the blade a little bit and flick out the rest of it, and it's gonna blend itself perfectly every single time. And this is the process that I've learned to use over time to blend this line out, because I used to use, you know, the balder, and then it just left a line. So now that I do it this way, I don't have a problem with a line, so it's easier to blend this bottom. And this is the very crucial blend to any blend, is because if you don't get this right, it's gonna throw off the rest of the blend. Since my magic clips aren't zero gap, I'm gonna need my Andis Slimline Pros to get out this very faint line. You won't see it unless you up close on the person, but I'm gonna use these and turn it to the corners and notch out this very faint line at the bottom. The very crucial step in order to what I like to call create a forever fade, where you don't know where the blend starts and stops, is to take the next guard up and go against the grain. So we have a number 1 on top, so we're gonna go to the next guard up, which is a 1.5, and close the blade all the way and go against the grain to debulk that area. Now if you just took the number 1 and opened it up, you're gonna leave a faint line around that ridge. So in order to skip that step of needing to fade that line out, we're gonna go up to the next guard, which is a 1.5, and close the blade all the way and debulk that area. The next step, I'm going to take a number 1 with the blade all the way closed and go against the grain halfway between the first guideline and the ridge, or the point to where you want the blend to stop. Like I said before, you want to pay attention to specifically the part of the guidelines that you're creating, because the bottom doesn't matter because it's going to be blended in by the guard below it. So you want to make sure you clear out all of this at the top of this guideline, which is why I use the comb, and clean it all out and make sure every hair is even at that particular point. Now if you notice, I'm purposely making the guideline in the front lean towards the lineup, and that is in order to make the lineup darker. So you want to leave more hair at the very point of the lineup than you do with the rest of the hair, so that, like I said, it creates a darker lineup. The very next step is to take a 0.5 guard or a half guard or a 0 guard if you're using Andis, and ever so slightly open that blade and flick out halfway between that guideline that's below it, that first guideline, and that second guideline, right? I know that my camera cut off, so I'm gonna pause it right here to explain what I'm doing. So if you want the blend to fade between that first guideline and that second guideline, you're gonna have to play in between that realm of that half guard. So you create it with it closed all the way. So now that you have that guideline created, you're gonna ever so slightly open it to flick it out further up so that it blends in within itself. This is when we're gonna get real nifty with this blend. It's the cleanup step, all right? So we're gonna open the blade all the way and attack those dark areas or those more dense areas, because hair doesn't grow uniformly all over the scalp. So you're gonna naturally have more dense areas than others, and to defeat that, we're gonna open the blade all the way and attack those specific points. This is how to create the blurriest of blends. And when you're doing this process, do not use the whole blade. See how I turn the blade to the side and notch out those dark spots? Please do not use the whole blade because you're going to end up creating another line that you do not want. Now I'm just going to snap that one guard back on and open it ever so slightly up. And then I'm going to flick that line out. Now remember, since we used the 1.5 closed against the grain to debulk that top area, you're not going to have to worry about it. So all you're going to have to do is take the one, like I said, take the one, close it down all the way, then ever so slightly open it back up and flick out that guideline that you're creating. It's going to blend right into that ridge area. And every head is not the same. So like I say, there's going to be dense areas in the scalp. So if there are, you're going to have to play with the lever a little bit to get those spots out. It's not magic. You're just going to have to look at the scalp. You're going to have to be a barber for a second and look at the client's scalp and determine what lever position that you need in order to get a dense area out.
Perfect.
Now this next step isn't necessary, but I'm a perfectionist when it comes to my haircut, so I'm going to spray a little holding spray on it and use a brush to lay that hair down as it naturally would be if the client brushes his hair. Then I'm going to snap on the 0.5 or the 0 guard and go with the grain where I made that first guideline with the 0 guard against the grain all the way closed. And what this is going to do is it's going to knock off those little hairs, those little prickly hairs, or what we call roach legs, off the blend, and it's going to make the blend even that much blurrier. So if you haven't used that technique, please try it. And then I flip it over and I'm doing some cleanup work right here. So if you haven't tried this technique, please do so if you want your blends to come out a little more blurrier. I can't stress this enough. Clean up work, clean up work, clean up work, clean up work. I still got my 0.5 on my 0 guard if you're using Andis, and I'm trigger playing this lever in order to get those dark or dense spots out of this fade. Now this is going to determine whether you have an okay fade or what I like to call a forever fade. That's going to make the difference. The cleanup work is crucial. The moment I know you all been waiting for is the line up. Now I'm going to hit with the holding spray and brush it down to make sure that it lays as naturally as possible, as if the client was to brush his hair. And while I'm brushing, I'm going to assess the situation. I'm going to look at his natural lineup and imagine where I need to place this line. Alright, I'm going to automatically look at the lineup and determine where I'm going to make the first notch, where and which one needs to be first. So if I need to make the one in the middle first, I need to visualize that. If I want to make the one to the left or the right, I need to visualize that. Go ahead and put in your head what you want the lineup to look like while you're assessing your client's natural lineup before you put those liners to his forehead, because it's going to determine this whole haircut. Let's hit play. Alright, what I'm doing here is I like to work with indicators, just like I did with the bald line. I made a point and I made another point. So this one I'm going to make a point in the corner and then a point at the front and then meet the two. And I'm just going to take enough hairs off of his natural hairline to get a straight line. You do not want to push a client's hair back, because it may look good for the first 1 or 2 days, but when it starts to grow back, it's going to look hideous. So be mindful of that when you're lining up a client. Don't take too much off the top. Now it may be necessary for you to take more than you would with any other client, but every client is not the same. Like I said before, I'm sorry about my camera work. I'm new to this YouTube, this tutorial thing, so I'm gonna get, those angles right so you can see what I'm doing with this box right here. So I'm just making it straight down, as straight as possible, and I'm doing the exact same thing as I did the front lineup. I made an indicator at the top and one at the bottom, then met the two. up is that razor guide. I'm gonna pull the skin taut in the opposite direction that I'm stroking the razor, right? If you don't do this, you're gonna end up cutting the client and a fight may ensue. So be mindful of what you're doing because razors are extremely sharp. So you're gonna stretch the skin in the opposite direction and pull or stroke the razor in that opposite direction. Now, what you see me doing here is I'm basically like pulling the skin and I'm grasping those hairs that's falling over that imaginary line that I spoke of before, and I'm cutting them off. So I'm not pulling the line towards the lineup. I'm pulling it away, because once you cut those hairs off, the hair is going to spring back to its natural position, and it's going to be lined up evenly and not hanging over that line that you created. Then turning the position around and stretching the skin once again and stroking the razor in the opposite direction of the stretch is going to get rid of all of that stubbornness. It's going to make your lineup so clean. At this point, you got a nice little lineup, but we're going to take it a step further and add some enhancement. So I'm going to put some holding spray on top of that guy, and while it's still wet, I'm going to apply those fibers right on top of that. You don't want to go overboard with enhancements. What the fibers do is they fill in the voids between the hairs so that the lineup looks that much crispier. The lineup was already crispy, but in order for it to look as crispy as possible, you're gonna have to fill in those little gaps, right? So after I put the fibers down, I put more holding spray on top to hold them in place, and then I go right back over with my liners and clean out any overspray with the fibers. You're gonna see what it does. And there you have it, a mid-bald fade with a number 1 on top and a crispy line to match. Can't get no better. You know what I'm talking about? If you like this tutorial and you want to see more from the kid, please hit that subscribe button and don't forget to tap that notification bell so you know when I post a new video. If you got something to say, leave a comment. And with that being said, this your favorite barber, Jason. And I'm out of here. I know, man.